So on and upward, I think there's just some issues that have been rolling around in my mind about this election that I really want to touch base on sometime soon before we get too close to the election and things become just hysterical. So one of the big issues that is still outstanding about the Biden administration versus the Trump administration is this whole issue of immigration. Now, let me tell you, it's a bigger issue than a lot of people are giving credit for. Okay, the UK just had a election that was called by this guy Rishi, whatever his name is, Sunak or Purnak, whatever. The, the prime minister whose government was elected on the backs of controlling migration, quote unquote, in the UK. They made all these plans, passed all these laws. The foreign minister had promised, swore she was going to get it under control. The PM swore they were going to get it under control. That whole party, I don't know if it's Labour, I think it was Labour versus the Tories, because Keir Starmer is a former Tory, and he was recently re-elected as an independent. But in any case, the Labour Party, which I think is the party that was just, and I'll just get to the point, outed, swept from power, was strongly against this unchecked, sort of never-ending, open-ended migration into the UK. It's been a big problem. A lot of people are upset about it. There's a lot of issues going on with it, and one of those issues is, frankly, Muslim migrants coming to the United Kingdom and starting trouble because they want to set up a caliphate in the UK, and they want to enforce Sharia law and essentially bend towards fundamentalist Islam in the UK, and it's a huge problem. Okay, the one issue that I completely understand about checking migration, it is a global issue, is having people who are vastly different socially and religiously and legally from the country they go to. Okay, but there's a large section of the migrant population that is legitimately fleeing these same people in their own countries. There are a lot of Syrians who left Syria to come to Europe and come to the UK and come to the United States even to escape the totalitarian state that is in Syria and backed by the Russians on top of that. Okay, and it does seem that there is a dovetail between the Russians getting involved in all these totalitarian states and forming this kind of totalitarian superpower, okay, globally, and the repression that's happening in these countries. There's a strong and obvious tie between those two things, and naturally, a lot of Western countries don't want to have that influence come in by elements of those societies that are masquerading as asylum seekers and people who are oppressed by those societies when they're not actually oppressed. They're just agents of that government. There's that argument which is coming up more and more and more, especially you see this unrest and violence and so forth happening as a result of these people when they come here or when they come to any other Western society. The French and these knife attacks that are a consistent issue, the knife attacks in the UK that are a nightmare. It seems like every day you read about somebody getting knifed somewhere in London or in some of these other cities, Birmingham, whatever. And it's a definite problem in certain parts of the United States. And people don't want to have to worry about getting knifed when they ride the subway. They don't want to have to worry about getting knifed when they ride a bus. They don't have to worry about getting shot when they travel in their towns. And that is a legitimate concern. But let's not forget that this has been going on for a long time. And there are people who are preying on these fears in this country, just like there are in every country. And this gets me back to Trump claiming that he had secured the border. while he was president. And he handed Biden a border that was secure, and Biden just basically blew it open. And I have got to say this somewhere, somehow. You cannot believe these people when they say things like this. They are literally just trying to drive a wedge between the electorate and the Democratic Party. As much as what's gone on the border under Biden, and absolutely that's a concern. I don't think anybody can say that the Biden administration has done a fantastic job of securing the border. But yet again, I think the bigger issue is it is virtually impossible to do. Yet these people are telling you that they not only can do it, but they have done it. And the truth is that that is far from the truth. Trump never secured the border. There are 4 borders, and it is not just the southern border that is the problem. They're also coming in by boats, by planes. The private planes flying over the border. They're being shuttled over the border. There are now travel agencies that are basically promising people that for $15,000 they can get you into the United States. There's the northern border, which has become an even bigger problem than the southern border because there's almost no enforcement of the border. The problem is this moment you start thinking that there is a border security, they just overwhelm it with more migrants. Just like lemmings, they will throw migrants at the problem. They'll lie to the migrants and tell them that they can get them over the border, then come here and they'll just keep throwing migrants over the border. Some of them will get through, and those will just be the incentive for the next wave of migrants. And what Trump did is he actually made a deal with the Mexican government to stop migrants from getting to the U.S. border. And the Mexican government has a long history of corruption and exploitation of these migrants. And what they would do basically is just rob them as they came through Mexico. One of the largest human rights violations in South America has been the exploitation of the poor by the wealthy and powerful. That's where all these cartels are coming from, is they rob and rape and kidnap and torture and kill all these people who are trying to migrate from South America to the United States. Long problem, okay? So the problem is that Trump did this, of course, under the table and lied about it. Came out after he lost the election, just like it came out that he had actually tried to steal the election while he was president. And then when he lost anyway, continued to blame the Democrats for stealing the election in 26 different states. Okay, these are simple facts. 26 different states, Trump is filing these claims after the election that the election was stolen from him. He's continually going to court to try to make this, to hold the election, to stop it, and Biden from being certified as president. And he's consistently, time and time again, caught with absolutely no credible evidence that the election was actually stolen in that state. Caught again and again and again. He's done everything he can as a human being to steal this election from the Democrats. Even long after Biden was certified, he's still claiming that he actually won and he is still the president. And there are people in MAGA and people in his support group that are repeating these lies over and over again, okay? There are people still talking today as if he is President Trump because they want to believe that he won the election. And they want to treat him as the president instead of admitting he's the former president. And the really sad thing about this whole thing is how all of this stuff drips and drabs and comes out in the public eye, because over time, when they get past the point where they say things that are not true, where they do things that are illegal, where they continue to promote this fantasy alternative reality of the United States in their own little conversations, in their own party meetings and so on, they start to feel comfortable saying it in public, and they start saying it in ways in which it becomes public knowledge and it comes out, okay? One of the big problems with Trump is that he lies about everything. He twists everything to his advantage. He twists everything to the detriment of his political opponents. He lies and he cheats and he just ruins reality with his fake bullshit alternative nonsense where he is a great guy, a spectacular president, the best president we ever, literally he's one of the top presidents we ever had, okay? And Biden is the worst president we ever had. He was happy saying all that kind of shit because a lot of people weren't happy about Biden because he's a liberal, because he's a Democrat, and because of the border issue. But the problem is Trump has no solution for the border, okay? He can talk about building a wall. He can talk about increasing the border security, increasing INS, increasing this, increasing that. He can talk all day long about doing this. But when he was president, he didn't do it. He was president, had both parties, had a majority in both houses of Congress. He didn't do it. When he had the opportunity to have thousands of pro-Republican, conservative, anti-immigration judges and government agents installed in the government, he didn't do it. He just didn't install anyone. Okay? He had the opportunity to put 3 judges on the Supreme Court, and he did that. But 2 of those judges were vacancies that came from the Obama administration, where all he really did was oppose Obama as much as he possibly could. The GOP and not even just MAGA, but also the GOP as a whole, has systematically opposed any legislation or appointments coming from the Democratic Party on the general principle that any and all of these appointments and legislation, Supreme Court justices that are nominated by the Democrats are bad, on that simple premise. And they have wanted to establish full and complete control of the United States government so that they can have pure conservative, MAGA-approved personnel in the government. They have an agenda to take over the government of the United States. And that is one reason why Trump has been cheating in the elections like he has been cheating. Because to them, what anyone can say about a MAGA government, a MAGA-dominated country, is that it's not liberal, it's not democratic, and therefore it is the best government. They are going to take over this country if they can, under the premise that it is the best thing for the country. Okay? Make no mistake about it. Whatever you're hearing from these people, whatever they're saying, 99% of it is bullshit. And you don't want to hear the other 1% because it is just mind-numbing. Okay? So, yeah, I spent a lot of time last week talking about that stuff, but ultimately the big problem is, it's true. You can't have a secure border when you have 2,500 miles of border to the south, 3,000 miles of border to the north plus Alaska, okay, and 2,000 miles of border on both sides of the country that are open to the ocean. It is literally impossible to secure the United States border under any kind of reasonable conditions that a Western society would do it, okay? They have enough trouble with these small countries in Europe securing the border against Syrian migrants who have to come all the way across from the Middle East, up through Italy, up through Central Europe, and come across to Germany. They have enough trouble with that. How the fuck are we going to secure the United States from migrants coming from South America? They don't even try to come up with a realistic, sensible, logical, and effective and affordable way to do it. They just lie to you. Trump did nothing but lie about that his entire campaign as president and now as a candidate for president going in 2024. He is the biggest bullshitter and liar and cheater and fraud that this country has ever seen as a politician, which is why he was not a politician before he became one. That is why. Because he didn't think that he really needed to become a politician until he realized he was going to get screwed by a Democratic administration simply because he is such a giant cheater, liar, fraud, bullshitter, and criminal. And he's like, well, the government's weaponized against me. It's, no, they're not weaponized against you. They're weaponized against people like you. Okay? You just have skated and avoided your legal responsibilities for so long. They've collected and become such an issue for this country that it's just well beyond time that his issues are addressed. It's not Trump personally. They might want to say it is, okay, but it's not. It's his type. That's the problem. And so we have to really I have to make a video about this basically at some point. So I can only go so long and talk about golf. I mean, I just can't talk about golf forever, and only golf. And so I think that the immigration issue is one thing, but the other issue is that there are reasons why the immigration issue is an issue that people who are being, quote unquote, oppressed by the United States' desire to have secure borders are not admitting. They're not admitting that they are a threat to this country. They just reject that idea just as much as anybody else who is part of the MAGA crowd rejects the idea that they are a threat to the country. They don't confront that reality. We do not need a tidal wave of people from other countries that will come here and try to act as if they're still in their own country when they would rather physically be in our country. And the obvious reason is because they're going to come here and start the same shit that they have in their own country. It's just that they'd rather start it here than in their own country, where the local politicians and the local people know that they're full of shit and have dealt with them effectively in their own country. We have to start to understand that part of the reason that these people are leaving their own country is because they've been effectively controlled in their own country. And they are just trying to escape control. You don't see people coming from the Middle East and starting riots and occupying colleges and buildings and shit in the United States because they're good people. That's just not what good people do. And I think the naive people in the United States who are buying into this crap and talking about, well, it's just like the civil rights riots of the 1960s and 70s, and all this, it's not, okay? The issues that people are talking about in 2024 are not the issues that we were talking about in 1965 or 67 or 72. When we talked about the Vietnam War and we talked about the civil rights and black voting oppression and things like that, those are totally different issues. And that gets me to the last thing I want to talk about, which is a huge problem. And even the conservatives in this country are not being honest about this. And that is people joining the military who don't want to fight in foreign wars. Okay? But they want the benefits of joining the military. They left Colorado, Idaho, Montana, all these Midwestern states and so forth, because they lacked sufficient economic opportunity to build a good life for themselves outside of the military. Same problem they have in the federal government, same problem you have in state government. There's no question that the government is an attractive employment system for people who have trouble being successful in the private sector. There's no question about that. But the problem is that the private sector has certain elements which corrupts it, and people talk about it. People talk about it all the time. You have conservatives talk about it, and liberals talk about it. Okay, there are issues involved in the private sector. There are issues involved in the government, and it is not without any basis whatsoever that people complain about our government. Not without any basis at all that people complain about our military. But the military exists as the action arm of the federal government, not state governments, not local governments, and definitely not people who are poor, don't really have any opportunity in their hometown, and join the military so they can get a steady paycheck. Okay? And there are a lot of people who did that, and a lot of people who were pissed off that we went to war and in Iraq, and a lot of people who were pissed off that we went to war in Afghanistan. There are a lot of people who were pissed off about potential war in the Ukraine, but that's why the military even offered them positions to have in the military. They're trying to shirk their responsibility that they signed up for when they signed those contracts to join the military, and just sit on their asses in the United States in their barracks and in their off-base housing, and enjoy those paychecks and get the training and do their training in their units in the United States at home without ever having to go overseas to actually fight. And it's just crazy. Why would we have a military in the United States unless these people are sent to war on occasion? That's why we have it. Okay, to say that we have it just as a deterrent while you sit on your ass, at your home base in Kansas and never have to worry about going overseas is crazy. That's, of course, we're going to have obligations as a society, as American society, and we need to have troops who are willing to physically go overseas and on deployments and represent the interests of this country. And if you have a problem with that, then you have no business being in the military in the first place. Okay, if you think that being in the military is being in the National Guard, and the National Guard never has to go overseas, you don't belong in the military in the first place. And definitely, you're one of the people that this country needs to get out of the military. Okay, I understand that there are issues with being called for successive deployments. You get called 2 times, 3 times, 4 times. I understand that. I understand that the Bush policies of us having stations in Kuwait or Iraq and I understand that what happened in Afghanistan. I understand that these are issues. I completely understand it. But the world is not meant to be a comfortable place where you sit in a barrack somewhere, drink beer, look at porn on the internet, and send emails. Okay, and then drive your sports car back home to your girlfriend's place. That's not why we have a military. And if you think that that's the kind of military we should have, then you are in the wrong line of work. And that is the attitude, which is why you don't have options other than the military. Okay, the world is not designed for people to sit at home and work comfortably in their home and go to work when they want to go to work and do the kind of job that they want to do and not do all these other things that are an effort, that are dangerous, that are uncomfortable, that are inconvenient, that are dangerous to their health. That's not the way the world works. Okay, we are not where we are as a society because we are a nation of people that are living in their parents' home or living in some home somewhere, and they get all the beer and cigarettes and sex that they want to have. That's not how it works. You don't understand that, you got a rude awakening coming to you. And I absolutely have no sympathy for people who want their cake and want to eat it too in life. No sympathy whatsoever. Okay, if you don't want to serve, don't be in the military. Just violate your contract and take the dishonorable discharge, or take the fee that you're going to take for walking out of your contract and leave, and let somebody else come and take your place who wants to do what they sign up to do, who wants to do it. I understand it's cost in marriages. I understand all these things. I completely understand that. But the solution is that we have more people in the military, not fewer, and we don't have people hogging spots in the enlistments and in service for the benefits, but never want to do the responsibilities that they signed up for or they got themselves into, whichever way you want to look at it. I'm not going to deny that some people have been lied to by the recruiters and some people have been taken advantage of, but we take care of these problems through the system, not by abusing the system. Same thing with the COVID payments, where people were getting COVID money for companies they didn't have and employees they didn't have, and just taking it, going off and buying Lamborghinis and boats and houses. I have no sympathy for those people either. Okay, We need to, as a country, stop with all this bullshit. Period. End of story. And yeah, the same thing for all these people who took out all these government-backed student loans and don't want to pay them back. Yeah, okay, absolutely. And Biden, I think, was wrong. I understand the motivation. I completely understand the motivation, but fundamentally, it's wrong to use government money to encourage people to go to college. Then when they get out of college and get a job, tell them they don't have to pay it. They don't have to pay because that 10% interest just keeps adding up and adding up and adding up. And they don't have to pay it because they shouldn't be saddled with debt so they can buy a house and keep the economy running. I understand the motivation that our politicians have for doing all these things that are wrong for people. It's still wrong. And all it's doing is encouraging even more wrong. All it's doing is justifying people who take advantage of the system intentionally by saying the same thing the MAGA people say all the time. I just want to buy a house. I just don't want to be saddled with debt. There's two things that really irritate me about this entire system that are just outstanding issues is all the people thinking that they can justify what they want to do by saying, I just want to do something that's supposedly innocuous. Okay? How many times have we heard people say, I just want to do X, I just want to do Y, and then they go through the whole freaking alphabet and exploiting people? This whole thing with the student loans is no different. Okay? You cannot justify having your loan wiped off the books because of the benefits of not having that debt. You can't do that. You took the debt, you signed the papers, you took the money, maybe you even went to school, but you can't avoid your responsibilities because of the consequences of doing so. Those consequences are good and bad. It's a mixture of pluses and minuses, and the entire system fails when we just turn our backs on our obligations. It doesn't work for any of us. That's for liberals and conservatives, for whites and minorities, for military people and civilians, for government workers. It does not work when we exploit the system by walking away from our responsibilities. The problem is the responsibilities that we negotiate in order to allow us to take advantage of them. And you only make it worse because if you get to walk away from your responsibilities, then Joe gets to walk away from his responsibilities, and Alice gets to walk away from responsibilities, and Lucretia gets to walk away from responsibilities. And ultimately what we have a country is a country full of people who are taking and not giving back.